Recording. Yeah, perfect. All right, so next slide, Cameron, if you could just introduce yourself real quick. Feel free to share what you want to share.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron Bush. I am an ESG, that stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance analyst at NASDAQ. I'm on the ESG advisory team at NASDAQ. We advise companies on improving their ESG strategies. And I went to UC Berkeley. I studied business administration and society and environment. I graduated in 2021, so about coming up on 2 years ago. But yeah, really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the other panelists as well.
Thank you, Cameron. Now we'll move on to Janet.
Oh, that's me. And that's not really me. That's the Carrizo plane last week, which is utterly amazing. And if you can get yourself down there, go. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really interested in hearing what Cameron has to say because I'm very interested in ESG investing. I have been doing a lot of organizing lately around climate legislation and policy. I kind of got into climate change work full-time about 8 years ago when I was laid off from my last actual job. And I started out really focusing on climate finance, but it's gotten a lot broader because it's a big topic. My background, as this little blurb says, is started out in journalism and moved on to communications and public policy. And it's great to be here. It's a great thing to be doing on Earth Week. Thanks.
Thank you. And yeah, if we could go on to Chrissy, if you don't mind giving a little introduction as well.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, Meg. Nice to see you. My name is Chrissy Antonopoulos. I'm a building scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. One of my roles, amongst many, is to mentor students, particularly in one of the U.S. Department of Energy's SULI program, which is how I'm connected to this group. Meg was actually my SULI intern last summer. I host and conduct research in residential buildings, figuring out how to make the built environment carbon neutral and promote social equity in buildings through energy efficiency. And my work is pretty broad, but all funded by the U.S. Department of Energy as a national lab participant. So thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and looking forward to spending some time with you all.
Great, thank you. And now last but not least, we have Dana.
Good evening, everyone. I have been an independent environmental planner for the last 30 plus years. I started my work as a teacher and in interpretation, and then went back to grad school and ended up organically developing a consulting business because I was hired to do project-oriented work. And the focus of my work over the last couple of decades has really been on park, open space, and alternative transportation projects to get people out of their cars and onto their bikes and onto trains, buses, as well as out into the open space. My projects are trail related, rail related, habitat related. I'm a biologist at the base. I do a lot of work on hazardous cleanup sites and on habitat restoration. So kind of broad. And to do that, I bring together teams of design professionals, engineers, hydrogeomorphologists, artists, architects, you name it. And my clients are primarily government entities, everything from city, state, federal government, as well as organizations like East Bay Regional Parks or Mid-Peninsula or conservancies and land trusts.
Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. We're really excited to have you all here and very grateful. But yeah, I think with that, we can go to our questions. If we go to the next slide. Oh, okay, just kidding. We want to have.
Sure, I can briefly introduce John. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, our next guest, John, wasn't able to attend tonight, but he's fantastic. He's a former Berkeley undergrad and PhD student who currently does GIS work at the California Air Resources Board. And we have followed up with him and will share his contact information with you all to ask questions or chat with him if he's comfortable. So yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, so again, thank you all so much. These are our panelists for today, and we're going to start with asking questions. So us here, each of us here will be asking a question, and we'll ask that each of you answer to the best of your ability. And then at the end of the event, if we have time, we'll take questions from the audience. So I think we'll start with Meg for our first question.
Yeah, thanks, Rhea. So first question we wanted to ask y'all is like what your current position is and what the journey has been like to get to where you are now. And yeah, if you didn't like already kind of share about what your current position is in your intro, if you wanted to add anything, if you already did, or just focus on like what it's been like to kind of get to where you are now. Yeah, could we start with Cameron? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah. So I already mentioned I am an ESG analyst at NASDAQ. And some of you might not be super familiar with ESG, and I basically think of it as it encompasses traditional corporate environmental sustainability as you would think of like carbon emissions, energy use, resource use, that type of thing, as well as social issues such as diversity, equity, inclusion, human capital management, those types of social issues, community impact, as well as corporate governance. So things like board diversity, board oversight, shareholder rights. And so what I do is I advise companies on developing ESG strategies, or if they already have ESG strategies, helping them mature those strategies with a particular focus on an investor lens and looking at what their investors care about, what general institutional investors care about, and helping them prioritize which ESG areas to focus on and invest in that will essentially get them the most bang for their buck. So in a world of limited resources for corporates and limited time, it's important to make sure that they're investing in the right areas that will have the maximum impact on their own company and also the maximum ROI in terms of how the public is looking at them, how investors are looking at them, rating agencies, their customers, that type of thing. So that's what I do. And I got here by, went to Berkeley, go Bears. I came in to study society and environment in the College of Natural Resources because I was just really passionate about climate change. And I quickly realized that business is a huge impact on the climate. I wanted to be able to speak the language of business. So I ended up deciding to double major, study business, and to try to figure out like where there's shared value between business and the environment and how to try to improve the impact of corporations. So I'm really grateful for my experience at Berkeley because I think it positioned me to be able to do this type of role. After graduating, I ended up doing management consulting, kind of just general management consulting for about a year. And it didn't have that sustainability focus that I was really looking for. So I ended up getting really lucky and finding this role at NASDAQ. And it's cool because I feel like I can really have a positive impact, help these companies figure out how to have a positive impact on their employees, the environment, and also figure out how to also get credit for that by getting more capital and improving their public image as well. So yeah, excited to talk more about it.
Thank you. Yeah. Chrissy, do you want to connect?
Yeah, sure. So I started back at the lab as an intern, actually, after my undergraduate degree, which was in economics. And at the time, I shared some similarities with Cameron. I wanted to be involved in sustainability and figure out how we could bolster investments in sustainable development. I was really passionate about that. And I took an internship to work on environmental impact assessments at the lab. And I was introduced to the world of research and the role that research and R&D plays in advancing environmental and human capital. And I decided that more of an academic route would be where I wanted to go. And I got really interested in the built environment, particularly in the way that urban infrastructure played in terms of environmental impacts, and how urban infrastructure is a really kind of dynamic ecosystem in its own right. And so I went back and did my master's and PhD in urban and regional planning with a bent on green infrastructure. And from there, I, expanded my role at the lab. I stayed part-time while I was in graduate school, kept my projects going as much as I could while I was doing my PhD. And once I graduated, I was able to really build a portfolio around green buildings, and have been doing that ever since, and have absolutely love what I do, even at the times when it's, crazy and stressful. But I feel really fortunate to have found such a great place in the national laboratories. And I feel very passionate about women in STEM and helping people like me. I was there 15 years ago, and I knew I wanted to make an impact, and I didn't know how. And so it's my turn to kind of give back to folks who are looking for similar experiences, which is why I believe in the SULI program, and why I'm here today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, could we go to Shannon next?
Sure. Well, it's been a long and winding road to this point. I was an English major at Stanford, and I kind of had every kind of job in journalism and publishing for a number of years. I worked for the Fogg Art Museum at Harvard doing fine art publications, and I think I was able to be such a generalist that I could change subjects pretty easily and fake it, which was thanks to being an English major. But I got a job at the California Academy of Sciences editing their natural history magazine for a couple of years, which was a really great kind of general introduction to ecological topics. And I'd been working in water in kind of technical ways for a few years already, but at the Academy of Sciences, the Natural History magazine really kind of focused me on this is why I've got this picture of the Carrizo Plain here. I mean, it's just amazing. So that was sort of the motivation that got me into a bunch of years as a consultant for local governments in the Bay Area working on water pollution prevention. And if you're working on water pollution prevention and you're thinking big about the topic, you get into everything, green buildings and diesel truck pollution and just all kinds of things. And I did that for a number of years, and it was really broad. We worked on recycling and hazardous waste issues, and a few other things happened along the way. And my last job was working for the state and regional water quality boards in California. And I had a grant for $5 million to capture trash and storm drains in 65 cities in the Bay Area, and it actually worked. But I got laid off when the grant ended, and then I was trying to figure out what to do. But suddenly, after being a consultant for a long time, after a few years in this job working for the water boards, I had a pension from CalPERS. Not huge, but enough to make me think about where that money was. And so I decided, since I didn't have a job, that I would see if I could get CalPERS to divest from fossil fuels. And that was, that's a project that I will not live long enough to finish. But that sort of got me into legislation in California in a big way, because there were some really interesting bills in the legislature that I had a major hand in, that were at least trying to get disclosure of fossil fuel investments. And I could tell you about a couple of great bills that are happening right now. So I was organizing a lot of people to work on legislation, and that devolved into this statewide group that we're forming, Climate Action California, which has been out there naming itself. The website isn't quite ready, but we've been very functional since last September. And we have a 501c4, and we're getting a 501c3, and it's a huge project, and it's really inspiring because the volunteers are wonderful, and we work on really serious and important topics around climate change. I'm not going to try to get all of you to volunteer, although I wouldn't turn anybody down, but I'm going to paste into the chat our volunteer form, which gives you a look at the number of, we're organized by teams, and you can see what we're working on, and it's really exciting work. So there's this, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Janet. Yeah, thank you for sharing that too. And last but not least, for this first question, could we pass it to Janet?
Sure. As I said in my introduction, I came into consulting somewhat organically. When I got out of grad school, I was looking for a job and sort of always came in number 2 because I had this wide range of skills. And sometimes that was almost too broad. And I would leave the interview with a consulting gig from that agency, but not necessarily the job. And after a couple of years of that, I realized this was where I needed to be, and that I was fairly independent and liked working in that manner. And then, grew from there to engage with many partners. And I think if you work independently, the strength, or if you work in a nonprofit, like the Emerging Climate Action Network, it's all about the partners that you have. But so I don't get a paycheck per se from one entity. I apply to requests for proposals from government entities and nonprofits, and I'm always reapplying to do a job. And whenever that job comes out, I put together a proposal, bring together a team, think about how we're going to do a mercury cleanup, how we're going to do a master plan for pedestrian and bicycle access in a city, think about how we're going to restore steelhead in a local creek. And so my work ends up being very much boots on the ground and implementing goals and policies that are there. In my other life, I also do a lot of work with nonprofit organizations. I work a bit also as a scientist, and have worked on the South Bay Salt Pond restoration as a wildlife biologist doing work on human disturbance impacts to waterfowl and shorebirds on the Pacific Flyway. So I've got a science background, an environmental planning background, and then a strength in nonprofits and fundraising. So I also bring money into my government and nonprofit projects to help them actually build things. But again, it was an organic way of coming about. And I think the first 5 years of my career, I was an educator on various levels, and I'm still an educator. I also teach at San Jose State University in the Environmental Studies Department. But I think the range of opportunities that I had in those early years and the contacts that I made actually allowed me to launch a consulting business. So I would encourage you who are thinking about transitioning out of college to make as many contacts as you can and follow up with all of those opportunities, all those volunteer processes. I was in a volunteer Earth Day event this weekend and offered to talk with a couple of students who were at San Jose State. So yeah, and I look forward to your other questions.
Great. Thank you all so much for those great answers. So now we have another question, which is, what is your favorite part of your job? And then on the other hand, what is the challenge that you see in your industry at the moment? So if we could start with Cameron, if you're okay with that, maybe we'll just keep the same order. And then we also want to ask if maybe we could keep the answers just to a couple of minutes so we can try to get through all of them. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to start. I think my favorite part, excuse me, of my job is that I get to work with a ton of different companies in a ton of different industries on improving their ESG impact and strategy. I get to work with companies in the software space, biotech, food, consumer goods, mostly companies that are publicly listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange, but also some private companies as well. So it's a great variety. It never gets boring. It's always feeling impactful. And I feel like I just get to learn so much, which I just love. And then I think a challenge that I see in the industry is that a lot of companies just don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to ESG. And so it's oftentimes a big challenge just trying to figure out how to convince them that certain initiatives are going to benefit them in the long term. Just trying to put on the business hat and think about like what sorts of recommendations are actually feasible for them to implement and how they could do that. And then just in the space in general, ESG is very rapidly evolving, and there's also a lot of noise surrounding ESG, especially in political settings. And I think it's sometimes like misconstrued what ESG actually is. And so, I mean, I think it's good that it's getting a lot of attention, but I think the far right tends to seem to be using it as like more for a political agenda, which I think sometimes people will get the wrong idea about what it actually is meant to do. And in my opinion, it's meant to help investors get a better understanding of the full picture of the companies that they're investing in. And so it really should be helping everyone to have broader disclosure and more transparency. But I think there's just a lot of misconceptions right now about what ESG is. So I think that's a challenge that we're facing in the industry.
Thank you. Awesome. Now I'll move on to Chrissy, if you're ready.
Yeah, sure. So what I love about my job is that the lab is filled with mission-driven people that do so many different things. And if you want to learn about something you didn't even know existed as a research priority, somebody at the lab is probably working on it. And it's such a rich environment in terms of being exposed to projects and applications and priorities, and learning how the federal government appropriates research dollars, and how those dollars trickle out to communities as actions, or research that betters our health or the health of the environment. And so it's very dynamic in that way. And you can do whatever you want to do. You might get hired into the lab as an economist or as an engineer or as a policy analyst, and you might work with a group, but you can build your interest over time and meet and network with folks that are doing research in an area that you find really interesting, and you can collaborate with them and join different teams and join different projects. So everything's constantly evolving, and a career at a national lab is a constantly evolving thing that you can guide. It's really cool in that way. I think the difficult things are that, you get really busy and spread thin, and sometimes it's hard to focus because there's too many opportunities, and we're project-based. So you don't just work on a team doing one thing all the time. You work on projects that have beginnings, middles, and ends. So things are changing, and it's easy to get spread really thin. Also, we're at a very interesting time in history where we have a real urgency under us to mitigate climate change impacts. And the federal government is flooding the system with dollars through the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. And that money is a floodgate. And I think there is a lot, while it's great that the money is coming out and trying to work on decarbonizing society is a critical need. There's not a lot of infrastructure there to distribute funds, and there's not a lot of programs stood up to facilitate the funds getting distributed to the endpoints. And so it's going to be a really challenging year to figure out how to help the Department of Energy get this IRA bill out to the public in a way that is beneficial to society. So I think that there are lots of not barriers, but there are lots of tricky situations coming up that the labs and the RIOs and all sorts of stakeholders involved in the energy future are going to have to work really hard to overcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting to know all the involvements with that. If we could then move on to Janet.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Chrissy. I think you're just exactly right that that there's so much opportunity in the IRA and in the infrastructure bill, and getting all of that realized and into action fast enough is a huge challenge, because we know how fast we have to go. It's amazingly fast. I think I'm just continually grateful to be doing this work in California, because California, not only are we probably more forward-looking than a lot of the rest of the country in terms of climate, but we're big enough to really make a difference. And it's exciting and inspiring to do this work here. And I think that's why, we can't stop. There is so much potential. We've just got to be on it 24/7, and everything is at stake. And we're going to get there. The question is, will we get there fast enough, and how much damage will we do before we actually decarbonize this planet? It's inspiring and daunting. In terms of the challenges, that I'm dealing with directly, constantly with legislation and policy that we're working on. It's that oil and gas and a lot of very influential unions see us coming. This is, as they feel it's existential for them, we know it's existential for the whole ecosystem. But none of it happens without a fight. And you just gotta be as strategic as possible and keep on plugging. But everything is at stake and everyone knows it. And so there's this heightened tension that is both invigorating and kind of exhausting. But this is the time and the place to be working on climate.
Very well said. Thank you for that. Lastly, we'll move on to Jonna.
I would say to you that the thing that I love about my job the most are the people and the places that I get to work in. So I work with dynamic, passionate people who are interested in doing right by society. And they come from all walks of life, professional life, to pull together these projects. And I get to work in great places. So I work in wonderful open space places. And then I also spend a lot of my time working what I call the leftover urban spaces, the little bits and pieces that are left where we're trying to retrofit an urban landscape that never thought about plants and animals, and that never thought about the impact that we as humans are having in how we move about and how we consume. And I've been doing this a long time now, and I would say to you that the biggest challenge today, and it's great that the Biden administration is put in place, and through the infrastructure bill and the IRA bill, we're flooding the market with money. People don't know how to spend it as quickly as they could. I'm afraid there'll be finger pointing later. I'm working on a number of sea level rise issues where we're concerned about development around the Bay. But the thing that concerns me the most, and it's folks who are students who give me hope, is that I'm finding it harder and harder to bring people together, and that there is more division in this country than there has been in a long time. And even in the Bay Area, to try and get folks to make positive decisions. And this is the place to be doing it. I've spent my career really bi-coastal in New England and here on the West Coast. This is the place to be doing it. We need to be doing it everywhere because that's the only way we're going to affect change. But California is a big landmass. But anything that we can do to bring the temperature down and have dialogue to affect change is more of a challenge today in my career than it has been at any time.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you all for sharing. I'll now pass it on to Emma.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. This is an interesting perspective. Moving on to our next question. Are there any classes, experiences, internships potentially related to research that you recommend for people interested in a career like yours? And you can start out with Cameron again.
So when I was in college, I was a part of an undergraduate student-run consulting organization called Beacon, and it was sustainability focused, and we worked with real companies. And I think that was my first actual experience, consulting, and it's not that far off from the work that I do now. And so I think getting involved with clubs on campus that are related to what you're interested in the climate space. It sounds like this club is probably a great place to be. But I think just like diving in, talking to people who are like excited about it. I think just like being engaged in your classes. And I just missed how I really miss now how like in college just everyone is so excited to learn, and there's just so many opportunities all around. So just like taking advantage of that, it goes by so quickly. So I definitely am grateful that I did take advantage of a lot of the opportunities that were available. There's a lot of classes that are in the business school that aren't limited to business majors that explore the cross section of business and sustainability. So if you're interested in that, there's definitely a lot of electives that might only be like 1 or 2 units, which is a great like 1 day a week kind of option class that is great to learn more. Sustainable industry was one of the classes that I took through the College of Natural Resources that I really liked. But yeah, I think you're all in the right place, but just really like making sure to take advantage of all of the resources that Berkeley specifically has. Like there's so many cool panels and speakers who come, and like because you're a student, you have so much more access to be able to reach out to people and build your network, like somebody said earlier. So really making those connections and maintaining them, I think, is like the best thing you can do.
And then, yeah, can we keep going down the line? Can we pass it to Chris?
Yeah, so I'll just build from what Cameron is saying. I think all of those things. I would recommend a couple of things. One is to noodle around and find the professors that have research dollars and figure out what their project is, and find the projects that are really interesting to you, and see what those professors teach in coursework and take those courses. The other thing is I would recommend exploring your interests, like whatever your interest is in sustainability, if it's on the business side, if it's on the ecosystem services side, if it's on the built environment side, wherever it is, hone in on what the fundamentals are, the principal STEM, usually STEM-based courses are that inform those theoretical platforms, and take a couple of those hard classes. They're hard, usually they're survey classes, they're a big credit classes, and they're big pain, lots of tests, lots of fundamental principles, but they will add such a depth to your understanding. And to that end, if you are interested in research, taking methods courses as well, and again, you're wherever that is in your discipline, there are fundamental methods courses associated with all of the different disciplines in environmental sciences, built environment. Engineering is another very focused area for research and development of the space, or the biological sciences if you're more interested and on the environmental side. And figure out where those methods courses are, and take a couple of those and really learn how to formulate a research question, an experiment, or a test, or a test of a hypothesis, and go through that, go down that path, because it'll be very enriching if you do desire a career in research somehow.
Thank you. Yeah, really appreciate that. Yeah, can we pass it to Janet?
Yeah, I think I'm next, but I'm not. All I can tell you really is that the only regret that I have is that I didn't go to law school, and that I didn't take more economics as an undergraduate, because I think that speaking economics, which I did later, is helpful in making yourself sound credible to the people you want to convince, and law school would have been good, not because I want to make I would have wanted to make a lot of money being a lawyer, but I think there are a lot of cases, a lot of situations where it would be very helpful to be able to speak law, which I kind of do by osmosis, but it's not enough. But other than those two comments, I think what you've heard from Cameron and Chrissy is just invaluable, and I don't want to take any more time. Thanks.
And I'll just jump in and add, in addition to what everybody else has said, I would, while you're at Berkeley and as you transition out of Berkeley, broaden your network. And whether that means you're joining the Climate Action Network, whether you're joining the Sierra Club, whether you're joining any other type of nonprofit that's engaged in the environment, that's an area of interest for you, you'll meet more people who may lead you to informational interviews and who'll open other doors for you. So I would suggest that you do that. And then as you think about the coursework that you're taking and what you're going to graduate with from Berkeley, I'd think about, and I frame it this way, I call it content knowledge. What is the content knowledge that you're going to walk out of the university with? Is it in the sciences? Is it in methods and statistics? Is it in writing? Is it in videography about the environment? Is it in GIS? What are the skills that you're going to have when you walk out the door that are marketable, that you can then turn into a job? And the more opportunities you have to learn those skills, whether it's in a lab or in a course or working at a student organization or even outside of the university, think about how that translates to a job or to a grad school application.
Yeah, thank you so, so much. We did want to try to squeeze in one last question. So for the sake of time, we'll ask about it. Like, y'all just respond with quick answers. And then anyone who's like wants to share can start. But the last question we wanted to ask before we wrap up is just like, what's something you wish you knew about like school or your career or life, whatever you wanted to be when you completed your undergraduate education? So I guess just looking back, what's something you wish you knew? And anyone can start.
I'll start. I'll just quickly say, I didn't have some of those fundamentals when I finished my undergrad. I had the economics, but I didn't have some of the really applied science fundamentals, and I wish that I had done that. But again, this is my path, right? As a researcher, at a national lab. But you know, hindsight is always 20/20. Just be flexible.
I can go next. I think something I didn't realize until graduating and in the working world, I didn't realize how unstructured life can be after graduating and how there's not really as many clear metrics for success as when you're in school and you know the classes you need to take and the assignments you have to do and what you need to do to be successful. But after graduating, it's much more ambiguous. And I think this can be exciting, but just remembering like you are in control of your own career, and it's up to you to advocate for yourself and prove your worth. And I think sometimes that like ambiguity of like, wow, I can really go do anything, like that can be a little overwhelming. But I think that's just something that I realized and didn't know until I got here, and definitely going to be continuing to figure that out. But I think just it's up to you to advocate for yourself, and you're in control of your future, and it's exciting, but it can be sometimes a little scary.
I'll just add a little bit. Don't be afraid to take risks. Take risks, try different things out. But then as I moved through my career, I started to define risks in a different way. And that was work can be very demanding, and there can be multiple projects in front of you, multiple deadlines. And yet I strive to always be learning. And I think it's important to continue to learn and add to your tool set, add to your thinking. But I realized, I don't know, maybe 10 years in to working, that I had to put a limit onto how much new things I would do every year. And I decided that I could only go 10 or 20% out of my existing toolkit every year. Otherwise, I was spending so much time learning a new method or a new field or a new something that my rest of my work suffered. But I always commit to learning new things every year. And I think that's really important because you won't have the structure of an academic institution to do that. You have to find ways to do it yourself.
Mhm.
Did you want to add on anything, Janet?
Yeah, I'm trying to, there's lots, these are wonderful comments. I think, I don't know, there was something about going to Stanford that gave me too much confidence. I think it's important not to, and heavens, these days, people coming out of Berkeley are at least as exalted as we were coming out of Stanford a long time ago. But I really appreciate the comments about continuing to learn things and not to try to figure that you're anywhere near done figuring out either what's going on or what you want to do, because it's constantly changing. And I think in this particular time, everything is happening really fast, and the opportunities and the challenges are coming at us at a huge rate. And I think we just have to really be flexible and open, and just be aware that we are the privileged people with the tools to actually solve the problem, and we'd better do it one way or another.
And let me add one more thing from personal experience. I do want all of you to protect, preserve, and buffer yourself. Don't think you can do everything. Cherish your health, protect your health, go to the Carrizo Plain, go to your favorite spot, wherever that may be, spend time with family, and make sure that you do what you need for you to stay healthy, because unless you stay healthy, you can't help anybody else. And the demands of what we all do can be great. So really think about that as you move through life.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Just one other point I just want to make is that I think each one of us can start from where we are right now and what we know and what we're doing, and we can make it work for this giant problem solving project we're all on. And we don't have to torture ourselves about the things that we don't know or the things that we aren't doing, because when I was working on climate finance and there were tons of other things I knew needed to be done, I just didn't worry about it because I figured somebody just as motivated as me was working on that other stuff. So, do what's fun, do what you like to do, make it count, and don't worry about the other stuff because somebody else likes to do that other stuff and they're doing it already. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I really appreciate, we all at SURG appreciate you all so much. Thank you for coming here, attendees. Thank you for speaking to us, panelists. You all had really amazing advice and things to say. Thank you everyone for staying past time as well. Sorry that we went a little over time. We'll be sending out contact info, the contact info that our panelists told us they're comfortable with sharing after the event through email. And yeah, panelists, if you want to drop any links or anything right now, feel free, but no pressure. Thank you again so much. And everyone, we hope you have a great night.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Bye, thank you.